This episode of Lurk contains detailed discussions of real-life crime, including descriptions that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised, especially for younger audiences or those sensitive to violent content. And an additional warning, this particular episode deals with the kidnapping and murder of a child. So if that's something you don't want to listen to, skip this episode.
I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey lurkers, welcome to this week's episode of Lurk Stab and Gab Sunday, where we plunge into the dark, the tragic, and the unresolved mysteries that keep us up at night. You'll notice that it's just me going solo. Usually Liz is here joining me. Liz is busy. She's got a lot of life changes going on, positive ones. She will hopefully be back soon. It may be another month or two. I don't know. Our schedules are not meshing at the moment, because she's busy and I'm super busy. But we do have some topics that we are researching or we're supposed to be researching. I haven't started researching. I've written it down. But anyway, she should be joining us again here shortly. And in the meantime, I think I may have a different guest co-host on for Stab and Gab next month. So stay tuned. Nothing has been done or recorded yet, but, stay tuned. Anyway, let's get back to the episode for this week or month, because these come out monthly. Tonight, we are traveling to Raeford, North Carolina, back to January 7th, 1998, for a case that's as heartbreaking as it is chilling: the kidnapping and murder of 5-year-old Brittany Locklear. This isn't just a story of a little girl taken from her bus stop. It's a haunting tale of a community shaken, a family's endless grief, and an investigation that has left us with more questions than answers. We've got eyewitness accounts, DNA evidence, and a trail of suspects that never quite panned out. So grab a blanket, lock your doors, and let's dive into the tragic case of Brittany Locklear. It's a quiet morning in Hope County, North Carolina, just outside of the town of Raeford, which is the county seat. Raeford was not a big city by any means. It was home to only 3,500 people and was the only incorporated town in Hope County. I happen to know this personally because I lived there. Part of Hope County houses a portion of Fort Bragg Military Reservation, though the portion of the base in question is rural and heavily wooded. Or at least it was back when this all took place. It's January 7th, 1998, which was a Wednesday, just after 6:30 a.m. The sun is barely peeking over the horizon, casting a dim glow over the cotton fields and pine trees that line Gainey Road. The air is crisp, the kind of winter chill that makes you pull your jacket a little tighter. At the end of a gravel driveway, 5-year-old Brittany Locklear stands waiting for her school bus. She's bundled up in a little Red Riding Hood jacket, wearing a green and white softball t-shirt, green denim coveralls, white socks, green and pink tennis shoes, and a green hair tie. Brittany, a kindergartner at West Hoke Elementary, is the smallest in her class at only 3 feet tall and 35 pounds, earning her the nickname Little Brittany. One teacher said she was a talker and a wiggler. She lived with her mom and stepdad and her 18-month-old half-sister, Brianna. She was known for her big smile, her love of Pocahontas, and giving hugs to everyone she meets, teachers, classmates, even strangers. Brittany wanted to be a doctor when she grew up and promised she would marry someone rich so she could take care of her parents. Brittany's mother, Connie Locklear Chavis, a member of the Lumbee tribe, is with her at the bus stop. which is around 200 yards from their trailer home. As I mentioned, the area is rural and the closest neighbor is within eyeshot, but the view is somewhat obscured and it's a distance away. The bus is running late, and Connie, needing to use the bathroom, makes a quick decision to run back inside. She leaves Brittany alone for just a few minutes, thinking the bus will arrive at any moment. The stop is in sight of the house, and this is a safe, tight-knit community. Or so it seemed. When Connie comes back out, she sees Brittany is gone and is relieved that the bus came and Brittany is on her way to school. So Connie heads back to the house to get herself ready and get her day started, but she's interrupted by urgent knocking on her front door. Connie opens the door to find her neighbor, Rose Johnson, standing there panicked. Rose was up early that morning, looking out her window. She saw a brown pickup truck, possibly a Ford or Chevy, speeding down Gainey Road. The truck slams on its brakes near Brittany's bus stop. A man jumps out, grabs something or someone, and speeds off. Rose doesn't see the abduction itself, but the truck's erratic behavior sticks in her mind, and when the bus comes, she sees it pick up her kids, but notices that it doesn't stop to get Brittany. She describes the driver as a man, but details are vague. No clear description of his face, just the truck and the speed. When Connie returns to the bus stop, Brittany is gone. The gravel is undisturbed, no signs of a struggle, just an empty spot where her daughter stood just moments ago. And the panic sets in. Real quick, I can tell you that panic is probably the absolute worst panic ever. My son was supposed to wait for me at school for me to pick him up because daycare was closed that day. And I went to get him, and for whatever reason, he thought that I was late and not coming to get him. So I show up and he's not there. And being a reasonable person who is pretty level-headed in any kind of crisis, was not quite as level-headed as I would normally be. And there were calls to 911, calls to the other schools, trying to figure out what was going on. And while I was talking to the 911 operator, that's when his stepdad found him sitting on our front porch at our house a half a mile away reading a book, because he didn't wait for me and he walked home. But that panic is, God, it is the worst feeling ever for a parent to think that your child is missing. And I just want to stress that. It is awful. So Brittany's gone. The panic sets in. Connie calls out for Brittany. She checks the house, the yard, the nearby fields. There's nothing. Connie heads to the school with her husband. Brittany's bus driver, Nancy Oxendine, said that she thought Brittany's parents had driven her to school, but when the bus arrived at the elementary school, Connie and her husband, Charles, were there waiting to confirm whether or not Brittany was on the bus. And of course she wasn't. Connie calls 911 to report Brittany missing and is told that she's not the first person to call, so it's assumed that the neighbor Rose called in as well. Within the hour, a massive search begins. They have a little bit of a description based on what the neighbor Rose witnessed. The man looked white and the truck was brown with a light bar on the top. Deputies, volunteers, and even state highway patrol helicopters with infrared scour the area, though the helicopters were grounded due to winds. The community rallies with more than 1,000 people searching for little Brittany, but there's a sinking feeling something terrible has happened. This moment is every parent's nightmare. Connie later said in interviews, "I only left her for a minute. I thought that she was safe." The guilt and the heartbreak in her voice are palpable. Brittany was a trusting, joyful child, the kind who'd hug anyone. Did someone take advantage of that innocence? Let's pause here to let that sink in. A 5-year-old, alone for mere minutes, vanishes into thin air. 2 hours after the search began, deputies found Brittany's purple book bag, her green overalls, and her pink and white shoes along a dirt road about 2 to 3 miles from her home. The search intensifies. By mid-morning, the Hope County Sheriff's Office, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, the SBI, and the FBI were involved. The search covers miles of farmland, woods, and drainage ditches. On Thursday, January 8th at 2 p.m., 33 hours after Brittany's disappearance, a volunteer found her body in a drainage ditch less than 3 miles from her home. She was partially submerged in water, still wearing her green and white t-shirt. Though the sheriff at the time, Sheriff Wayne Byrd, didn't reveal the information in the beginning of the investigation, the autopsy revealed the unthinkable. Brittany was raped and drowned. A little side note that's a little important is that the sheriff did not disclose the cause of death until he was at his re-election campaign event. It's believed that she was most likely held underwater and killed right there where the body was found. The medical examiner notes signs of trauma, but the water has washed away some, if not most, of the evidence. Still, investigators recovered DNA from her body, enough to build a genetic profile of the killer years later. A checkpoint was set up on January 9th, the Friday after Brittany went missing. Police were stopping drivers on Gainey Road near the abduction site, hoping commuters might have seen something. Investigators also spoke to Brittany's biological father, but he had little contact with her since her birth and was ruled out as a suspect. Hope County Sheriff Department, the FBI, and SBI set up dedicated tip lines. Throughout Friday, they received as many as 30 calls per hour. Another 1,500 calls came in over the weekend, meaning over 2,000 in the first few days. One tip points to a brown pickup truck, matching Rose Johnson's account. On January 11th, an investigator spotted a man driving a brown truck on Gainey Road. When the officer sees this brown truck, he makes a quick U-turn to pull the guy over, but the driver of the truck doesn't pull off to the side of the road, and instead there's a bit of a chase. He's eventually pulled over and claims he was late for work. The man is taken in for questioning, and he spends the next 6 hours being interrogated by investigators. He did consent to a search of his house and his truck, which Sheriff Byrd says they dismantled, searching for evidence. In the end, they are pretty sure he's not their guy. With no evidence tying him to Brittany, he's released. The Lumbee community and Hope County are devastated. 4,000 people attend Brittany's funeral, where investigators were placed strategically in the crowd to observe the mourners, looking out for any odd behavior. But nothing and no one of interest is spotted. Sheriff Byrd does ask the local TV stations for copies of their footage of the event so that it can be reviewed for anything they may have missed at the moment. Connie, inconsolable, tells the Charlotte Observer, "She loved everybody. She didn't find no faults with anybody." The community feels violated. Gainey Road, once a safe haven, now feels like a hunting ground. Later that day, 2 more brown pickup trucks are pulled over and their drivers are brought in for questioning. But just like the guy from the day before, they're released when investigators are satisfied that they weren't involved. Then there's another truck that ends up being a wild goose chase too. One that they got a tip on saying that it was abandoned in the woods in Lancaster, South Carolina. But Sheriff Byrd personally makes the 2-hour drive to check the tip himself. Unfortunately, it's determined not to be involved. The investigation zeroes in on several leads. George Marston, Brittany's elementary school principal, becomes a person of interest after rumors surface that he picked her up in his truck. By his own admission, he drove past Brittany's bus stop each day on his way to work. But Marston said he was misquoted and said he mentioned he often thought about picking up Brittany to take her to school, but he never did, because it was against school policy. Either way, super creepy in my opinion. Sheriff Byrd and his team took the rumors seriously. Investigators did interview him twice, though once again, they determined that George isn't really on the top of their suspect list. Rumors are quickly debunked and Marston is cleared. For the next few months, it's more of the same. They get a couple of leads about sex offenders driving trucks that potentially match the ones seen by witnesses. Another suspect fits the FBI's profile, but is also cleared after questioning. One possible suspect, who lives about an hour and a half north in Alamance County, actually looks promising, but it's determined that he wasn't near Hope County the morning that Brittany was taken. By May of that year, investigators have worked roughly 2,000 leads, including a false confession out of South Carolina. Then there's a tip that comes in about someone specific that gets everyone pretty excited. Sheriff Byrd says this person is their best suspect so far. He's a white male between 25 to 40. He drives a brown pickup truck and even lives nearby, though not in Hope County. Sheriff Byrd says he fits 4 of the 6 criteria we have developed as a suspect profile for this case. If he fits just one more, I'll charge him. And this gets everyone's hopes up. The man was never charged, so I assume that he had an alibi. The reporting on that suspect, whoever it was, kind of just drops off. Sheriff Byrd had 3 full-time investigators on the case, helped by the FBI and SBI, making up a team of 30 investigators. Quantico found nothing, and there was nothing done to the body. She wasn't tied up. The killer was believed to be a local because the location where Brittany was found was secluded on a little-known dirt road next to a hog farm. Then there's a shakeup in the case. Remember that I mentioned the sheriff sharing the cause of death at his re-election campaign event? Well, Sheriff Byrd lost that election. Interesting thing about Sheriff Byrd, I knew him and worked on his 1994 campaign. Basically, all I did was paint some signs and get a free jambalaya dinner because my husband at the time and his father were volunteer deputies. I'll divulge a little bit more about that in a bit. On December 18th, a new sheriff was named. Jim Davis was sworn in. With the new sheriff comes new employees. All new people were brought in, which means there's a bunch of new people who know basically nothing about any of the cases that are open and active. By January of 1999, the entire investigation is turned over to and run by the SBI, which is, again, the North Carolina Bureau of Investigation. SBI Special Agent Fred McKinney isn't exactly subtle about his opinion of Sheriff Byrd's management of the case. He says that all Sheriff Byrd's boasting about potential persons of interest scared off some people that they'd been hoping to interview. He also said his team was reviewing all of the work that had been done so far, and they were doing their own evaluations. It's April of that year when they tell the public to disregard everything they've heard so far about the man in the truck. The initial witness reported a white man in a brown truck, but that might be wrong. It seems like they were trying to get people to think outside of the box and possibly draw out witnesses that might not have come forward because the information they had didn't exactly fit the known narrative. There was also mention in some articles that the truck had a camper shell on the back, but I'm not sure how valid that was. In February 2001, the new sheriff, Sheriff Jim Davis, pulls the family into the sheriff's department and accused them of being guilty of her murder. At one point, Connie Chavis is directly accused of killing her own daughter. Then they show Connie's father-in-law, Brittany's step-grandfather, James Stevens, autopsy photos and tell him he's a sexual predator. Connie and her family report that Davis pressured them to confess, a tactic that yields nothing. James Stevens, heartbroken, tells WNCT, "Lord, I hope they find whoever killed that baby." The accusations are unfounded, and the investigation is going nowhere, and Sheriff Davis himself is now up for re-election. Sheriff Davis held a press conference in August of 2002, saying that he had uncovered a giant conspiracy, one engineered by his old rival, Sheriff Byrd, to throw everyone off the real killer's tracks. According to Sheriff Davis, the killer was former Sheriff Byrd's son, Robin Byrd. Robin was in prison at the time, serving a 23-month sentence for trying to burn down the house of Sheriff Davis's campaign manager. Apparently, this epiphany came from a witness named Jordash Leach. Jordash had a record of his own, which included a conviction for armed robbery. Back in 1998, Jordache was one of the witnesses who told investigators he'd seen a white guy in a brown truck driving near Brittany's bus stop right around the time of her abduction. But according to Sheriff Davis, that wasn't his original story. His original story was that he'd seen Robin in a blue truck driving nearby. Sheriff Davis claims investigators at the time coerced Jordache to change his description of the vehicle. Davis remains pretty vague on the story, but is quoted in the paper saying the original investigation was intentionally misdirected by local law enforcement as a result of a wide-ranging political conspiracy. The reporter went on to say that Davis said he believes Brittany's death was politically motivated and its inquiry purposefully bungled. He noted that the girl disappeared 2 days before candidate filing opened for 1998 elections when he ran against Wayne Byrd. So the conspiracy wasn't the cover-up of the witness ID of Robin and the truck. The kidnap and murder was part of a larger conspiracy for political gain. By the way, no one is buying this. Sheriff Byrd said his son never even had a blue truck, and the SBI says it doesn't even know what Sheriff Davis is talking about. And I'm going to weigh in here a little bit too. I knew Robin. I met Robin. And while he wasn't an altar boy, seeing him trying to pull attempted arson isn't surprising, but kidnapping, raping, and killing a little girl is a major stretch and not something I think he would be capable of. And I'm not saying I was his best friend. My ex was friends with him. I went to his house with my ex, and I saw him around town and at his father's election events that I went to with my ex and his family. I don't even know that we qualify as acquaintances. I knew him by sight. I went to his house one time. That's about it. Do I think he could burn somebody's house down? Probably. Do I think he threatened to do it? Absolutely. Do I think that that means that he could just leap over to the rape and murder of a 5-year-old girl? Like I said, absolutely not. I really think that that is a stretch from what I know of him. I never really felt anything like that from him whatsoever. I'm not going to go into any further detail about information because Robin died last year, and anything else I know or could say doesn't really have any bearing on this specific case. Pretty much everyone sees this press conference and announcement by Sheriff Davis as an election stunt. Davis loses his re-election campaign, and Sheriff Hubert Peterkin takes office later in 2002. In the summer of 2003, the investigation, at a standstill ever since Sheriff Davis's press conference, once again started picking up steam because of an unrelated crime. Police in Carthage, North Carolina, which is about 45 minutes away from Raeford, arrest a guy by the name of Keith Douglas Laundrie on suspicion of armed robbery. Keith was a firefighter at Fort Bragg, which is about 30 minutes away from Raeford. Following his arrest, some of his fellow firefighters are tasked with going through his locker on the base. What they find is a photo of Brittany Locklear. The photo is one cut from the newspaper, but it's still highly suspicious. Laundrie's DNA is compared to the sample on file, but it doesn't match and he's dropped as a suspect. There is nothing that explains why he had this photo, but he was a firefighter during the time Brittany went missing, and firefighters from Fort Bragg were involved in the search. It isn't a stretch that Laundrie was just greatly affected by the case. Honestly, who wouldn't be? By 2009, over a decade after the murder, Sheriff Peterkin and his team begin looking at the investigation from scratch. Though he hoped it would give his investigators a better understanding of the case, another decade passed with no resolution. Rose Johnson's account of the brown truck is the strongest lead, but it's not enough. She didn't even see the abduction itself, and the truck's description is too common. Brown pickups are everywhere in rural North Carolina, and at this point we aren't even sure if it's an accurate description. Other neighbors report seeing a suspicious man in the area days before, but no one can provide a clear sketch. The lack of concrete eyewitness details frustrates investigators. By 2015, the SBI announced they built a generic DNA profile of the killer, but it doesn't match anyone in their database. The News and Observer reports the killer left plenty of DNA behind, but without a suspect match, it's a dead end. Advances in genetic genealogy, like those used in the Golden State Killer case, give hope, but no breakthroughs have been reported as of 2025. Was the killer a local who knew Brittany's routine? The bus stop was visible from the road, and the abduction happened in a tight window, suggesting someone who'd watched her before. Some speculate the killer was passing through, a drifter in a brown truck who saw an opportunity. Connie Locklear Chavis has never stopped seeking justice. In 2021, she said, 22 years later, and I'm still waiting. She keeps Brittany's memory alive, describing her as a girl who dreamed of being a pilot. The family offers a $20,000 reward for information leading to an arrest, and tips can be sent to the Hope County Sheriff's Office at 910-878-1279 or the SBI at 888-624-7222. As of this recording, the case remains unsolved. The DNA profile is the best hope, but without a match, it's just a waiting game. The Hope County Sheriff's Office continues to accept tips, and Connie holds on to hope that someone, somewhere, knows something. The kidnapping and murder of Brittany Locklear is a gut-wrenching mystery. A little girl stolen in broad daylight, a family left in agony, and a killer who slipped through the cracks for over 27 years. If you know anything about that brown pickup truck or what happened on Gainey Road in January 1998, call the Hope County Sheriff's Office or the SBI. Your tip could bring Connie the answers she's been chasing for decades. I know there's not a whole lot of gab when it's just me, but this case I found infuriating because the only thing either of the sheriffs in the beginning, Sheriff Byrd, Sheriff Davis, were worried about was winning re-election. And I think wholeheartedly that they used this case in an attempt to win re-election. Thankfully, it didn't work for either of them. But it's shameful what they did. I also think that perhaps the first guy in the brown pickup truck that kind of fled from police should have been looked at a little bit more. I don't recall there being mention of any kind of DNA matching or anything. I don't know if they looked at that at all. I also think that they need to absolutely get genetic genealogy done on this. I think this is how this case gets solved. I don't know that they have submitted it, but the tool is there, and they should absolutely look at one of the many labs that do that kind of work. This little girl deserves justice, and so does her family. I think they were put through the ringer. They dealt with the kidnap and murder of their child, and then were actually blamed for it as part of a sheriff's re-election bid to look like the big man. It's just shameful all the way around. And it hits a little bit close to home. As I said, I lived in Raeford. I lived in town. I did not live outside of town, but where this happened isn't far from where I actually lived. I did not live here during the time of this incident, however. I moved back to Maryland. But my daughter was born in Raeford. Well, technically she was born at Fort Bragg, and she was only a year and a half younger than Brittany. So it really hits close to home and makes you think. Makes you want to grab your kids and hug them a little close. So that's it for this episode of Lurk for Stab and Gab Sunday. You can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or lurkpodcast.com, where you can check out our blog, newsletter, and our Meet the Team section. Love the show? Spread the word and drop a 5-star review. Make sure you hold those little ones a little tighter tonight. And until next time, keep lurking.